Fantastic.
So I'll just introduce you briefly. You don't need much introduction, but still. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Coast to Coast seminar, which is happening on October 28th. And we have a very well-known speaker who's also the co-founder of the PCPEP program, which many of you are already aware about. And she's going to be talking about, which is Dr. Gabriella Ilie, and she's going to be talking about prostate cancer and mental health. And Gabriella, I'll give the platform to you to introduce yourself and get this presentation started.
Thank you so much, Natasha. And thank you so much, the Prostate Cancer Foundation of Canada, for having me speak today here. I'm just so excited to be here and share some of the work that we've done over the past couple of years. And I'll start by welcoming you all to this talk. My scope today and what I'm trying to accomplish is give you some understanding as to why is it that we want to talk about mental health to begin with respect to prostate cancer. And so I'll touch a little bit on the scope of prostate cancer survivorship in Canada, but also globally, why survival is not enough. What's the burden of mental health among men diagnosed with prostate cancer, things related to fatigue, sexual, social challenges, and the science behind the whole person recovery, and why is it important that we adopt lifestyles that deal with the various needs that we encounter during this journey. Then I want to talk to you about the mental health evidence. And I want to review some of the most recent evidence and show how, for example, depression and distress are not just side effects, they're part of the disease process. And as such, they must be treated. Then I'll go over some of the science behind our program, the empowerment program. I'll talk a little bit about pelvic floor muscle training, how it restores continence. It can restore, not in all cases, and dignity, improves quality of life, reduces the stress. I want to talk about exercise and how the science that we have behind exercise that reduces, lowers depression, improves energy and vitality and self-image. I'll talk to you about nutrition and some of the science behind that, intimacy and sexuality, social support, mindfulness and stress reduction, and how together they're packaged to bring back the relational piece of our life, which plays a quintessential role in health and healing. So we'll talk about from evidence to empowerment, tell you a little bit about our program, and what we're doing here in Canada, but also worldwide. We have 16 plus clinicians across Canada and globally behind this program, as site PIs, alongside with Rob and I and our team. And then towards the end, I want to talk to you a little bit about how empowerment is for everyone, and equity is part of science. We're very happy and thrilled to have received some funding from Movember Canada to really bring the program to men that perhaps need it most in vulnerable populations, where there's very little support. Black communities, Indigenous communities, younger men, especially now, because we see more and more younger men get diagnosed. It's a devastating journey for some. Gay men in rural community that live very far away from grocery stores that are fancy and offer a lot of, nutritional opportunities. But then towards the end, I also want to share our website and invite you all, if you have a prostate cancer diagnosis, to try our program. It's free. And maybe if you're a little skeptical, watch our documentary first, Empower, and hopefully that will might entice you to try our program. Yeah, and I guess the overall message of today's talk, I hope to be that recovery is not passive. It's built daily. It's built through evidence, scientific evidence. It's built through connection, not transaction. Connection. And I'll be talking quite a bit about that as well. The relational piece that I guess is missing a lot between what patients experience and what the medical system has to offer, and empowerment. Let's see if I can go next slide. And although I want to start with a review of the mental health literature with respect to prostate cancer, I have no choice but to go back a bit, because in some respects, our lab and the work that we've been doing has shed the light on this silent epidemic of mental health and distress that I'm about to talk today to you about. So for me, it all started back in 2006 when Frank Sobey, who's the gentleman there on the left, was diagnosed very young, at 50 years young, with prostate cancer. And him and his wife identified this gap that perhaps a lot of you know about. You know, you have those worries and waiting for appointments and often wasting because you have to, you know, you don't know, you're in stress and you don't know exactly what's going to happen. A lot of things get put on hold during the journey. And so he noticed the gap, they noticed the gap between what was happening to them at home and what the medical system had to offer. And very soon they realized that there's nothing to gap this bridge. And when he went to speak to the urologist at that time, David Bell, who was head of urology at Dalhousie University, said, sorry, Frank, but it's very unlikely for the government to invest money in research that will look at this. It's complex, and who's going to take this task on? So he decided to endow money to the university for them to look for a scientist, a chair in science that will come in and do research that will bridge this gap. And so I come in 2016 as endowed scientist in prostate cancer quality of life research. And here's the story. I was a professor at the time at University of Toronto, knew nothing about prostate cancer. I knew quite a bit about mental health, about quality of life, was doing research in traumatic brain injury. I was doing research in some brain oncology, but that's about it. So I come in and I say, okay, look at the literature. And, you know, you review the literature. At that time, I reviewed the literature, and a lot of the needs associated with men diagnosed with prostate cancer were around urinary function, some of the side effects of ADT. And I said, well, to put it bluntly, I just felt like there's no heartbeat. That's what I want to really understand what's going on here. So I literally, fourth day on the job, I run to a prostate cancer support group, and I met with a man and I said, look, this is the situation. I really want to help you, but I need you. I don't think I can do this without you. I think if I just go to the literature and I approach this problem top down, meaning let's see what science has identified to be the needs of men diagnosed with prostate cancer, and I start developing something driven on that, it's not going to work. You need to be part of this. Your wisdom, your life wisdom, and your experience going through this has to play a role. And I start talking to them, and it becomes very clear that this is a whole body problem, a whole body issue. There are issues related to social systems, to social economic status. There are biological issues. This is a complex thing to untangle. So I said, look, I'm going to have measures that are going to try to capture your voice using measures that have been used in the scientific literature and they're known to be golden standards. But I also want to look at other things. I want to look at personality. I want to look at mental health. I want to look at things related to social, emotional, spiritual. Yes, you heard me well. And social function. Things that we know to play a factor in how people do when diagnosed with a disease. So I just want to get a more holistic picture of what's going on. The results came back, and there wasn't much of a shock. I know the graph is way too small for you to see, but the red line indicates issues with intimacy and sexuality, something that we knew in the literature. So that didn't surprise me. Men were feeling disconnected. They were worrying about family and friends. They were having problems with fatigue, problems sleeping, weight. The shocker and of course, we went and published the results. But the shocker for me was when I started looking at mental health. And just to put things in perspective, in Canada, about 9% of Canadian men screen positive for anxiety, depression, or both. And in this sample that I had about 500 maritime men, the rates were double. So I looked at that, I scratched my head, and I said, wow. So of course I run to the clinician, is more like it, who, when I asked, how your patients doing, they said, don't know, 15 minutes in the medical appointments, what can we draw from that? I mean, I know how they're doing. They present well, they smile, they come with their wives sometimes, or their partners sometimes. And for all I know, we're talking about the disease. We're going to get this out. And that's it. So, I went to them. I run to them. And I said, those are the results. What do we do? They said, we publish quickly. Let's publish. okay, I have a background in epidemiology, trained in experimental psychology. You learn to be very cautious when it comes to results that are novel. And this was novel. Nobody had shown that before in the scientific community. So I'm like, oh, I'm a little nervous about this. So what I did unbeknown to, of course, we published, yes, but I run to independent data sources. So I went to an independent data source called Atlantic Pathway. So when I say an independent data source, what does that mean? They collect the data, I have nothing to do with it. They collect all sorts of data on men diagnosed with prostate cancer, other types of cancer. Let me have a look at mental health. Lo and behold, we find the same relationship, double the rates. Then we started looking, well, how about men diagnosed with prostate cancer compared to men with other forms of cancer? And again, we find the same relationship. Definitely men with there is something about prostate cancer. Okay. Then we go into the Canadian longitudinal study of aging, the same thing. 25,000 men all over Canada. So clearly at that point, I'm saying this is not a statistical artifact. We're on solid ground. And of course, we start publishing and other people start looking. At the same time, we go to the European Urologic Association, and people from Denmark were just beginning to look at various markers of poor quality of life. And fair enough. They look at their data that they had back to 2011, and they find that even 18 years later, men diagnosed with prostate cancer had higher odds of being on prescribed medication, almost between 2 to 4 times higher rates of being prescribed medication for depression, anxiety, or both. Post prostate cancer diagnosis. So then you also, other countries like the United States, and I'll be going through that study in a second for you and review it, found the same. And of course, everybody starts looking, right? They find it in UK, they find it in Australia. It's everywhere. So now that I backtracked to tell you how we got here, so let's look a little bit at the literature, because this literature also played an important part in us developing PCPEP and actually doing something about this. Not just, okay, you uncovered a silent epidemic of mental distress. So what? What are you going to do about it? And I'll tell you in a second what we did about it. But let's have a deeper look, if we could, at the literature behind this. So this is a group of scientists, Hugh et al., that found that over 3 million men in North America are living with prostate cancer, and the survival rates are now higher than 98%. So you get the diagnosis, you tend to live a long life. Overall, survivorship is high. Now, we've done a remarkable job extending life in prostate cancer, but not enough to address how men live after cancer. And this landmark population study by Hugh and colleagues, published in the Journal of National Cancer Institute in 2024, followed over 18,000 men for up to 16 years. The findings are striking. Men with prostate cancer are 2 times more likely to develop depression in the first 2 years after diagnosis. Keep that in mind, please. I will make reference to it later. And the risk remained high more than a decade later. Right. And the Danish found that out, the Australians as well. Rates of anxiety and mood disorders stayed at between 20 to 40% higher than men without cancer. And the presence of depression increased the risk of death by 61%. Let that sink in. These numbers remind us that cancer and the cancer experience does not end when treatment ends. It's not like, that's it, my prostate is out. They radiate and it's over. No. Men carry long-term psychological burdens. Like what? Fear of recurrence. In fact, there's a lot of psychological evidence to show that by and large, what causes high levels of cortisol is not one major life stressor, but the smaller stressors. I don't know, I'm going to have appointments, I'm going to have to wait. What if it reoccurs? What's going to happen? So that waiting, that worrying, that holding on to find out what's going to happen, right, plays a role. Fear occurrence, identity changes. Am I a man? What kind of a man am I? Fatigue, sexual dysfunction, and uncertainty about the future. So the message from this science is clear that mental health is survivorship. It's not outside of prostate cancer survivorship. And if we don't address this, we leave men vulnerable, not just short term. We're not just talking about the first 2 years after diagnosis. We're just talking long term as well, long after the tumor is gone. Why are men so vulnerable to distress after prostate cancer? The study helps us unpack that. Continuous androgen deprivation therapy, ADT, nearly doubles the risk of mental illness compared to intermittent therapy. Every 6 months on ADT increases risk by another 4%. High radiation doses also correlate with worse mood outcomes, a clear dose-response relationship. And so beyond biology, social and economic factors play major roles. Men who are, for example, unmarried, living with low income, or from marginalized backgrounds, especially Black and Hispanic, were more likely to experience depression and anxiety in this study. So the takeaway here is that depression is simply not a reaction to diagnosis. It's driven by a combination of biological, treatment-related, and social determinant factors. And this tells us that we need an integrated, personalized survivorship model, like Frank Sobey identified, to bridge what's going on with the person versus what the medical system has to offer. One that recognizes how treatments, hormones, relationships, and inequalities all shape men's mental health outcomes. The Radical PC study also offers one of the largest and most current snapshots at psychological morbidity in prostate cancer survivorship. Over 2,400 Canadian men were assessed in this particular study at baseline using the Patient Health Questionnaire. It's also called PHQ-9. And it's a golden standard of validated depression screening questionnaire for men diagnosed with prostate cancer, has been validated. And 1 in 12 met the clinical threshold for depression. And that number rose to more than 1 in 10 among men beginning ADT, androgen deprivation therapy. Even though these figures are lower than older estimates, they remain roughly 4 times higher than rates seen in the general male population. So in short, contemporary therapy may extend life, but depression continues to act like a silent toll on mental health. This forest plot on the right side highlights this constellation of biological, psychological, psychosocial factors independently linked to depression in this particular trial, the Radical PC cohort. The strongest signal was poor functional status, men struggling with activities of daily living, like what? Tying your shoes, going to the grocery store, being able to, get things for yourself, travel, were 5 times more likely to experience depression. A prior psychiatric history, meaning having been on medication for anxiety, depression, or both, and lifestyle factors or other types of psychological conditions as well, such as lifestyle factors such as smoking, alcohol consumption, misuse is more what we're looking here, also tripled the risk. Interestingly, younger men and those with high-risk prostate cancer were particularly vulnerable, perhaps reflecting greater perceived loss of control and fear of recurrence. These findings reinforce, just like with the previous study, that depression in prostate cancer survivorship is not simply a psychological issue, but a biopsychosocial phenomenon requiring integrating screening and care. And there's another study by Cao and colleagues published in 2022 in The Oncologist. And what they did is they analyzed more than 37,000 men with prostate cancer receiving androgen deprivation therapy, ADT. And of them, about 3,900 and something, about 4,000 men, which was about 10.6% of the entire sample, received a new diagnosis of depression or anxiety within the first year of treatment. Over 10% so developed this new onset. And typically around 9 months after starting ADT. Yet nearly half of them, half of those diagnosed, 47%, received no mental health treatment at all. Only a tiny fraction received psychotherapy, less than 1%, while 1 in 5 were prescribed benzodiazepines, drugs that are linked to dependence, to falls, to cognitive issues, cognitive decline in older adults. And roughly 1/3 received SSRIs, the most common antidepressants, which, unlike benzodiazepines, are considered an evidence-based first line of treatment for depression and anxiety. All right, if people are really in bad shape, sometimes medication helps. It just triggers that help that they need to normalize things, and then psychotherapy is wonderful to follow up with. See, the oncologic system identifies disease. The primary care system is quietly managing the emotional fallout. There's no guaranteed mental health pathway for men starting ADT. The second analysis of Cao et al., so they did the secondary analysis, that showed that the majority of mental health prescriptions, more specifically 72%, were written by primary care physicians, not oncologists or psychiatrists. Only about 6% came from psychiatrists and fewer than 5% from cancer specialists. This means men often experience the emotional and biochemical consequences of ADT in isolation from their cancer team. There is very little integration between oncology and mental health. We still work in silos in those two domains. And as a result, many men fall through the cracks of care. These findings highlight a critical opportunity for change. This is where we can make a change with awareness, with data, with organizations such as yours to raise awareness. How can we collaborate more? How can we change this? Linking oncology, primary care, and mental health in a coordinated model is an absolute must. This is 2025. We can do this. Programs like PCPEP and CancerPEP that we've designed, they fill this gap using this daily science-based intervention in exercise, mindfulness, and social connection to restore resilience and mental health well-being. But we do need a coordinated model in healthcare between oncology, primary care, and mental health when it comes to medication. And how do we address this? Because the takeaway is clear. Psychological recovery must become a standard component of prostate cancer care, as essential as any drug or surgery. Salvi wrote this beautiful editorial in Prostate Cancer and Prostatic Disease, and he reminds us that we still treat psychological care as optional. And basically, his entire premise in this paper is about that. Let's wake up. Let's have an integrated model of care. That's his premise in the article. He reviewed the National Cancer Institute priorities, and he found that 3 of 68 calls focused on mind-body factors. Yet Mundell and colleagues who did a meta-analysis showed that in 22 randomized clinical trials, psychological interventions consistently improved depression, anxiety, and distress in men with prostate cancer. So there is a direct influence on survival, adherence, and quality of life when you help men. Cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, group programs that focus on nutrition, on exercise, are perform as well or if not better than medications for many mood disorders without toxicity. So his message is very simple. Whole person care is evidence-based medicine. And so science also gives us solutions. The same data that reveals these risks show us opportunities for prevention and healing. We know that regular exercise, mindfulness, social support, and purpose-based programs can reduce depression and anxiety, even in men undergoing ADT. And that's what the PEP programs do. the prostate cancer patient empowerment programs, the Cancer PEP. We expanded the program to all forms of cancer. We just finished developing breast PEP, and we're starting it in 2026. We've developed another PEP program for all chronic disease. They're built on structured, consistency, structured, relational, not transactional, relational science, evidence-based daily practices that combine physical activity, meditation, nutrition, and peer connection. And there is a consistency and stability in the delivery of those programs. They expand what we currently have locally. They don't replace local support. On the contrary, they provide men with something that is stable to take at home and help them during a very difficult journey. So I think the takeaway message is that we really must reframe survivorship care. Every prostate cancer pathway should include mental health screening and follow-up. Empowerment and psychological recovery must be seen as essential, not optional. And policy and funding models should reflect this priority. Because the science is clear, empowered men, supported men live longer, stronger, and they live more meaningful lives after prostate cancer. And here we are. We decided to do something about this. So we designed the PCPEP intervention, and we looked at the science. And what we did, instead of leaving all that science sitting there on shelves, we decided to put it in a program. And so what does the science say? That consistency, stability, it's important. That having exercise is important. That attitudinal healing, forgiveness, spirituality. And I'm not talking about religion in particular. We're not telling people to go to church. It's a more secular type of spirituality. But it matters. It's a part of health and healing. It's part of the medicine wheel. You know, the indigenous people didn't use it just like that. It's very important. And in fact, I'm very happy that we used it in the program because, look, we're expanding the program to indigenous populations, to the Maori in New Zealand, and they love it. Without this component, the program will not be the same. Dietary recommendations, so much science out there about what to eat, what not to eat, when to eat is just as important as knowing what to eat. Live monthly video conferences, seeing people live, not just offering resources somewhere on a platform for people to check. We know that is, you know, adults are no different than children when it comes to behavior and new lifestyles. You know, people do what you do, not what you tell them to do. So it's important to connect with people. That relational piece is absolute key. And I think that's probably part of the reason for which, if you review the literature, you see very clearly that most interventions, especially apps that are developed nowadays, so there's like an abundance of apps flooding the medical system, people's private strolling on their app, on their phones. They have very high uptake, and people are prepared to pay hundreds of dollars for them, but within a week. Within 2 weeks, they drop. Very high attrition, very high uptake, very high attrition. Right? Because why? We're people, we're social beings, we like to connect. Family communication matters, and consistency in communication matters. So if you go on our website, you'll see that there's some information about the program. There's a 10-minute introduction video that you can watch about what this program is and what it does. There is a link for New Zealand. There's a link for South Africa. We're going to open in Romania. We're just translating the program in Romania, about 90% done. And in Dutch will be available in 2026. But let's talk about the program. So what does it have, and why does it bridge the gap, we argue, between what the person goes through and what the medical system has to offer? Well, it begins with a series of educational videos that we've created. So Rob, my co-founder of the PCPEP program, and also my husband, is an oncologist, is a radiation oncologist with over 30 years of experience under his belt treating prostate cancer, in addition to other forms of cancer, breast, pediatrics. And so both of us have, and I have about 25 years of experience in psychology and teaching psychology to over 25,000 students at the University of Toronto. So we both have we're good at what we do, respectively. But the introductory videos and educational videos have been put together, the majority of them by Rob, or at least some of them, how to navigate the medical system. Beautiful video that walks you through. What do you do in an appointment? Who do you bring with you? What you should keep in mind, things that you're not going to think of when you are in front of the doctor. You only have 10, 15 minutes. And the appointment went, and then you go home and you say, what was this about? What am I supposed to remember from all this? So how to navigate the medical system, the do's and the don'ts on that journey. There's also an overview of the program where we go through the science behind the program. Then there's a beautiful video that talks about the anti-cancer diet. And what does the science says? Out of all those studies that we published, what should we eat, when we should eat, and why does it matter? And does eating alone matters, or is it that I have to do other things? And of course, it's always other things. I think one of the things that we realize very soon on our journey is the importance of having this holistic program. It's not just, that you're going to eat well now and you're going to do better. You need to move your body. You need not to be sedentary. You need to have a good night's sleep and need to know things related to sleep hygiene. So in a way, oftentimes patients tell us, I almost feel like you took me back when I was young. And I wish I knew all those things when I was young. I'm sure I would live a much better life. How to start an exercise program? What's important? How do you build muscle? What do you do to build muscle? Why is that important, especially when you're on ADT? We talk about intimacy and connection teaching, and it's not just we don't just talk about the technicalities of it. Oftentimes we have nurses, and of course within our medical system as well, we have nurses that cover all the technicalities. We talk about the pumps and all that stuff. Yes. But then there's more to that. Intimacy is relational. What does that mean? What different types of intimacy are there? How about love languages? And we talk about mentors and buddies, and we'll cover that in a second. This is a much better version of the program that we have now that we just released for Cancer PEP, but let me walk you through PC PEP. So what's the motherhood behind the program? A daily video from Rob and I describing, prescribing, and demonstrating the various aspects of the program the way a couple would. So we talk to you as if you were our neighbor next door, and we're translating the science in ways you can accept and understand, that my grandmother would understand. We're funny because we're normal people. And I think we also want to show that relational means we're no different than one another. We really are all trying to lead a good life so we can do the things that we love most in our life. And that's the common denominator. We don't talk to you necessarily as, Rob doesn't talk to you as a doctor. Of course, there's some of that coming through. I mean, he can't stop being who he is. Even if he says he might, but no, there's still an oncologist there. Don't get me wrong. And there's still a, psychology researcher there in me and a scientist, hard-nosed scientist, but I'm also a wife and I'm a mother and I have pets and we live life. So we talk about all that. We integrate it. So those videos are very palatable because they're relational. They're not transactional. Oops. Let's see. Hopefully we're going to go to the next slide. Yeah. So the program has now, because of AI, well, you all heard about AI, we can translate in various languages. I like playing this because it makes me speak Chinese, which is something that I always wanted to do. And AI is getting me close to that. Oops, sorry about that.
Hello, gentlemen, this is day one of our program. Bienvenue. Nous sommes vraiment très enthousiastes.
Nous sommes ravis. Mă gândesc că pot schimba creierul în 180 de zile. Y la idea es que puedes crear nuevas conexiones en tu cerebro que te permitan ser tu yo más feliz, tu mejor.
Correcto. 我们正在改变习惯，迎接新的自己，吃得更好，感觉好，生活家。当然是的。
That's just my favorite part of this. It's incredible what AI can do. And we're quite excited. I think 2026 is going to be the year that we're finally going into Asia. And those guys are much more advanced. They found out about the program. They want to bring it there. So we're working with them to see what 2026 is going to bring. But we're excited about that. So let's talk about the components of the program. Exercise, not cosmetic. No, it's never been. It's an antidepressant, anti-fatigue drug, and a masculinity-preserving intervention for men on ADT. The literature is very clear on that. And so we have an exercise component. Part of it is 5 days days or more of aerobic exercise every day, we're asking you to go outside and do the things you love to do, whether it's playing pickleball, whether it's walking in the park with a little bit of sweat on the eyebrow. But 30 minutes of exercise, pure motherhood stuff, the Canada Health is recommending it as well. 6 days plus a week if possible. Make it fun. Super important. Do what suits your fancy. Listen to music if it's easier. But we talk about sedentarism. Don't sit for too long periods. Sitting is the new smoking. Home-based training. So we have videos that we developed. What you see here in the left corner is me doing the easier exercises for people that have problems with mobility. There's Rob using your own body weight every Monday and Thursday. We ask you to do 30 minutes of exercise using your body weight plus elastic bands that we give for free to keep at home. We have 4 levels of difficulty, so you can do the most easiest, and then as you progress, you can do the more difficult series that we have. Of course, you can go to the gym at that point. If you have a routine, it doesn't matter to us as long as you do the prescribed strength training in addition to aerobic exercise, which is very important, of course. And the study we reviewed earlier, there are Radical PC and many of its kind framed around heart risk, have a clear take-home message for us. And that is life coaching, nutrition, weight, smoking, alcohol reduction is actually mood preventive oncology, must be part of the care. Dietary recommendations, we've recorded 26 videos, again, describing, prescribing, and demonstrating nutrition. So easy, an oncologist can do it, yes. And he's good at it, believe it or not, plant-based in this case. We do not say that you have to become vegan or plant-based, but we do encourage you to eat foods, mostly plants, not too much. Stay away from food chemicals, ultra-processed foods, and we talk about that. We have now an archive of over 1,000 videos that we've created, translating the science since 2019 when we started rolling this program. And so every Monday we update the science. We choose a topic related to health and living, related to prostate cancer. We review the literature, and we come up with practical tools that we can all integrate to live better lives. We talk about swapping in healthier foods for ultra-processed foods. We talk about decreasing red meat. There is quite a bit of literature talking about that. We talk about eggs and milk and how some studies, what they find. We talk about increasing fruits and veggies, time-restrictive eating, vitamin D, depending on where you live. If you live in New Zealand, you might not need as much, but if you live in Canada, oh, you do. We talk about when to eat, because when to eat is just as important as what to eat. And there's new science, budding science, that we can be empowered of. Information is power. It's really good to know. Okay, well, so if I take a break and I give my body a little bit of a break, my body can recover better. Food sharing with the loved ones. Pelvic floor muscle training. So much evidence on this showing that pelvic floor training can both prehabilitate and post-habilitate. We developed 26 weekly videos. Rob is in all of them with researchers from Australia that have run randomized clinical trials on the various type of Kegels that are there, and which ones are good and what to do and how to best put them in practice to prevent urinary incontinence and obstruction, but also to help with sexual functions, because we have quite a bit of science showing that pelvic floor muscle training is also helping with regards to sexual symptoms, etc. So 26 weeks of those released once a week, 3 times a day. We're asking men to engage in those specific exercises that become a progressive training program. So they're not the same each week. They're developed to increase from week to week with experience, of course. So you get text alerts 3 times a day saying, time to do your Kegels. Nobody knows what you're doing in your pants. Do them. Progressive training. And then relaxation and biofeedback. we adopted science from Yale and Harvard University that show that we can develop new neurocircuitry. And in fact, it's a wonderful anti-aging device. It helps with stress reduction, and it helps with Kegels. It helps with dealing with the wait time between medical appointments. We also have prescribed intimacy and connection exercises. When we teach men and their partners how to renegotiate intimacy, redefining sexuality beyond erection, playing touch, for example, communicating needs to one another. We're directing them and directly treating their depression and anxiety that comes from sexual loss, which is a loss. And we need to mourn that loss, and we need to do something about it. So this is not nice to have. It's core mental health care for couples in survivorship. We have things like Walking Wednesdays. We talk about different types of intimacy and sexuality. We have group discussions, Facebook dialogues. We talk about love languages, the role of forgiveness. Yes, you heard me well. We talk about attitudinal healing and emotional needs. And then we have a whole series on social support that comes in multiple forms. Every man that joins the program is optionally offered the option of having two buddies, two men, co-participants that are going through the program, that are perhaps going through the same treatment type as they are. Men who took the program many years ago become mentors. And we have a Facebook group. Now we have pre-sessions for rural men, for young men, for Indigenous men, for Black men, for gay men. They're working really well. An entire community has developed there. Men become friends. Many of them have been friends since 2019 when the program started. We've been having those monthly video conferences since 2019, really, but 2020. They're going, never stopped one. We record all the events, and so that's why we have a huge archives. Part of the program, we also have those weekly compliance surveys, which men told us to have them because they keep them accountable and they work quite well. I'll have you listen to a testimonial from a patient, and I'll be wrapping things up in about 6 minutes.
Biggest problem I've had following the surgery was incontinence. And that it's been 5 years now since I've had my surgery. So I had Depends or adult diapers for some time. It's embarrassing. It's not pleasant. You know, if you cough, you sneeze, oops, you know, anything you've had to drink was there. It makes you think, you know, should I try to drink less? But no, I've got to drink because you need the fluids. If you're going out to try to shovel, you've got to put, well, I used to take a lot of paper towel over the pad, let that get the initial leakage when you'd be shoveling or doing anything strenuous whatsoever. Through this program, there's a different series of Kegels and different exercises, and they're lasting for me about 15 minutes and doing it 3 times a day. And I would say during this past month, I'm about 90% drier.
The surgery had a profound effect on me. And the loss of sexual function had a profound effect on me. So when I started this program, I was struggling, and this program was a way for me to turn it around.
Programs help me to be motivated in terms of my physical fitness. And so, yeah, I'm way less now than I did a decade ago. They're not able to have an erection. That can be a very devastating thing for people. And it kind of brings a dynamic of loss. And I would say that part of what my wife and I have gone through over the past several months now has been grieving this loss. And it's a funny thing because I present well, I look healthy, but there's a loss still that we're going through. I remember Dr. Gabriella's talk about intimacy, and my wife and I have joked about it sometimes at home, where I say, I need a touch, I need a.
Sorry about that. Oh.
I eat. All of this is part of the motivation that we receive from the program. I'm in a better space.
Sorry about that. Oh. So what we had to do, and I think what we have to do moving forward as a community, is we have to apply the same scientific rigor that we see in drug studies to behavioral intervention studies, because this is how we change systems. I think this is how systemic changes can really occur. So we've done the same. We started with conducting a randomized clinical trial when we had 128 men enter the program. They were either scheduled for radical prostatectomy or radiation therapy, and they were randomly assigned to either 6 months of the PEP program in addition to the usual care or usual care. And at the end of the 6 months, we assessed them again, and then the usual care group alone got the intervention. What we saw is, again, what we knew exists in the literature, and I reviewed some of it with you, is that men that followed usual care, they had 3.6 times higher odds of developing anxiety or depression or both. And again, if you look at the literature, it's very clear. The first 2 years are it can be very difficult for men. And that's where usually depression and anxiety develops. And if not treated, if not acted upon, it can last for a very, very long time. And if you're on ADT, about 9 months onset for the development. Men who were on the PCPEP program did better, and they continue to do better until the end of the year, even after the program completed. We noticed and we published results showing better urinary function associated with the PCPEP program, urinary incontinence, but also urinary irritative obstructive function, sexual function, just for the men on radical prostatectomy. Men lost weight in the program, whether they got the program right at the diagnosis or whether they got it 6 months later. We also did a variety. I don't have the time, unfortunately. We have over 40 publications. How can I possibly cover them all? But I do want to say that we're doing so many studies looking at really trying to untangle what works for whom in what context. And this is very important science. So for example, one of the things that we're able to demonstrate, and Cody McDonald, Mr. McDonald is online attending this presentation, I believe. His master's thesis showed that it is empowerment. You empower people. That is why their psychological distress is better. And interestingly enough, I have a postdoctoral fellow, Dr. Smith, who's also online, and a study that he's working on right now shows that it is not urinary, doing better urinary, that actually mediates this relationship. And I think that's quite interesting that more than 50% of the relationship that we saw between the PCPEP versus standard of care and psychological distress is explained by activating the role of the patient in their own care. Yes, we involved cost economists. We're working with the government. We're working at the provincial. We're working at the government Canadian level right now because we have engaged cost economists to do a cost-effectiveness analysis. And what they found is that if you put 10,000 men through this program, the medical system will save $6.6 million. This is not, so it's not costing the medical system anything to adopt this. In fact, it's costing them money in a system that is broken and definitely needs some help right now. This is just a synopsis of the many studies that we conducted. We conducted qualitative interviews with men to find out what works for whom, under what condition, what needs to be tweaked to meet men with vulnerable issues, living in vulnerable populations. So a lot of work has been done. We are now doing a pan-Canadian international implementation trial. The program is free for men to join at any time. We do ask that you contribute to science, and that will be your gift, not just to yourself, but to other men, because we want to support this community. And my husband and I we've had our own conversation, and we decided to be of service as long as we live. So we have a lot of work to do, and so really hope that you're going to give back to science. Really invite you, especially if you're from a vulnerable group, to take this program. Black communities, Indigenous, younger men, LGBTQ, rural communities. Go on our website, pcpep.org, and see if you are inclined to participate. pcpep.org is our website. There's a documentary there for you to watch. 50 minutes. It won 2 awards. And those are just some of the many clinician sites that we have throughout the country, 16 plus of them. I will end up with this little clip, if that's possible, for 3 more minutes. Thank you.
When I started this program, I was struggling, and this program was a way for me to turn it around.
If you're looking for one way, one practical way to change your life and bring more peace into your life, well, this is it. Today's talk is really about some very practical ways that we can all do right now to have better communication, to find some peace, to not feel so frustrated and so cornered by emotional reactions, and really take our power back and feel empowered.
It's really tough to put all the pieces of your broken life back together. My determination was I was going to regain a new life and build a life that would work for me, having survived they do provide you with resources, but the resources are sort of helpful, but they're not holistic. The attraction to the CPAP program was that it was all encompassing.
Living sensibly, like doing something with your life, giving the world a better place, helping at least one person, feeling as if you have a purpose in life for meaning. That's really important. Showing gratitude. It could be something very small. You could be looking out and seeing blue sky and sunshine rolling in the window now. I've always got something to be thankful for. I'm not some 25-year-old young father who's going to leave behind young children who may never even have memories of me. I began to know that negative emotions aren't good to have around. Let them go. Forgiveness, for example, good practice. Seeking out things that involve positive emotions. Hug someone for more than 10 seconds. You get a release of chemicals that make your body feel good. Some sort of spiritual connection. Having a network of friends, keeping your body healthy and making it a place where it's inhospitable to cancer. And I do believe that your mind has a lot to do, your attitude has a lot to do with things. It's not just putting on a happy face, but really genuinely tapping into positive emotions. I'd like to be happier, so I go with gratitude.
That's where the CPAP program comes in. They lean heavily into how to carve out time for yourself, eat well, good relationships, ensure you're getting sleep. It's the holistic approach.
And then you share that with your friends and relatives, change that family culture. You're then starting to have an influence at the level of society. And that's really our goal, is actually increase the health and wellness and happiness of the entire society.
I think what they're doing is nothing short of courageous. They're making huge sacrifices. I wouldn't say that either Rob or Gabriella have low-stress jobs. She's so concerned about other people's well-being, she will sacrifice. And I think Rob too. I don't think Rob, my sense is he doesn't enjoy throwing himself out there, but he does it because he knows it helps. And I encourage him to keep doing it as long as they can. But like cancer patients, draw that line, take care of yourself.
We're here to love, to remove the blocks of the awareness of love's constant presence in our life. We all yearn for this connection that reminds us who we truly are. Where the love of men is, so is healing.
I'm speechless when I think about the great sacrifices that my family and wife made, my kids, and that Rob and Gabriella are making for not just me, but for all the people. And I wish everybody could have the benefit that I've had. I think it's nothing short of wonderful.
I think this is a good way to end. Love John's quote. It really inspires me. He says, we're spiritual beings having a human journey. If what you're doing is not helping others, you might be missing the point. John said, thank you so much, Prostate Cancer Foundation of Canada. Thank you. We advertise your groups and the work that you do on our website. You've been there since your inclusion. And of course, we thank our sponsors and the many urologists and radiation oncologists that have been so kind to join this movement. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hey, Gabriella, the presentation was amazing.